Hey everybody, welcome back. Craig Schaup here with George Thomas, our film critic from the Akron Beacon Journal. George, it's been a couple of weeks. We've had some things move around here, but we are back at it. And everybody's probably been waiting with bated breath on your first review, which is the Super Mario Galaxy movie. I know that they've probably just been waiting and waiting and waiting. When is George Thomas going to give his review here? Now, obviously, you can read and watch George's reviews at beaconjournal.com, but if you come over to this space, you've had to wait a couple of weeks, and I think it's worth the wait if you're a certain age, right?
Yeah, like under 8. Maybe I'm just too freaking old. Maybe it's the fact that I didn't play anything related to Mario Brothers until I was 58 with my kids. But, I don't get it. Apparently, there are a lot of Easter eggs in this thing. The movie looks like a video game.
Mm-hmm.
It tastes like a video game. It's nonsensical like a video game. And obviously people, especially kids, are eating it up. And it's one of those movies that you're duty bound as a parent to take your children to and just take the hit. I mean, in my review, I wrote about doing that for my older son when Thomas the Tank Engine came out. He was all jacked for it, and I'm like, and I had to review it, but still, I had leeway with family films, and I wasn't looking forward to it. But there I was on a Saturday morning at 10 a.m. enduring Thomas the Tank Engine because that was my job,
right?
Both in real life and as a father. So there we go.
Well, and obviously part of your job is watching just about every movie that comes out, and you're drew the short straw, I guess, with Mario here. But I think you were actually pretty generous though in your print review, saying that it's a B movie for kids. Maybe the adults would probably not find anything worthwhile out of it, but you did seem to be fairly nice, even kind of couching it with the age bracketing. But is there anything redeemable for an adult? Because I think we've talked about this several times where the best animated movies really cater to every person in the audience, and that's why they work so well. And maybe that's not why they always make a lot of money or whatever, but I mean, it seems like, why do these movies, like the Mario movies, you would think with the nostalgia factor of people my age that grew up playing it, that you would want to cater to an audience that doesn't just have to go because their kids want to go, but they want to go too because they grew up on Mario.
Well, you would think they would do that. And going to your first point about age bracketing, that was the only fair way to review the movie.
Right.
I mean, I'm at an age right now where I realize not everything, especially family films, are going to be made with me in mind. So that's why I did that. But as far as there being something for the parents who take their kids to see it, it's right in that wheelhouse. It's older millennials with these younger children. And you would seriously think that the filmmakers would try to cater to that. But it seemed as if they were more interested in selling more video games than anything else. Is there anything for an adult to chew on? You get an occasional Star Wars reference, and there's a couple Minion homages because the production company behind this created the Minions. But that's about it. I appreciated the Minion homages. The Star Wars stuff too. So what? No is the short answer. I don't know if they felt any obligation or not. It's impressive in visual execution. It's stylistically beautiful. As far as narrative execution, it's very simplistic. And, I guess they didn't want to overcomplicate it. More power to them. I mean, I sincerely think that had there been something there for those older millennials who did grow up on the game, I mean, Mario Brothers were a thing until after freaking Donkey Kong.
Right.
Now, I remember playing Donkey Kong as a teenager in high school.
Yeah.
That's how long the character's been around.
Yeah.
And I'm Gen X. So that should tell you something. Had there been something for even people my age to chew on, it would be making more money and doing more repeat business, I think.
Well, you know, and obviously the first movie, I mean, these are profitable movies because they don't sink a ton of money into the production budget, even though, like you said, you know, I mean, the production is there, but you know, I think it's produced it for like $100 million, and you know, even if you add in the marketing costs, you're maybe looking at 225 million dollars total. So you're not having to make $1 billion to be a profitable film, but obviously the first one did. This one's well over 600 million into its third weekend, and if I'm not mistaken, it hasn't even come out in Japan yet, which you would expect quite the bump there. So, you know, clearly these movies have been a cash cow under the. Is it still under the Universal brand? I know the first one is on Peacock. Yeah. So
Universal,
you know, clearly,
Illumination.
yeah. So clearly they're doing something right as far as finding a way to make a hit. Obviously, though, I mean, you can make these movies. Like I remember, you know, you think about movies like Wreck-It Ralph, which obviously are kind of in a fictionalized universe, but still bring in some of those favorites maybe that you're aware of. But you know, they made a couple of movies that you know cater to adults and to children, and I think it goes to show you that you can make these types of movies, you know, not just sort of be for children only. And obviously, the money's coming in, so I don't think Universal really cares, and they don't need to care until the money stops coming in. But it's just kind of a shame because I think growing up, I played Mario. I grew up on Mario, and I think it would be fun to like get into it. Like, you know, we were at Project Hail Mary watching that. The trailer for Masters of the Universe came on, and even though it looks like it's going to be terrible, probably, I'm excited for it because I grew up on He-Man and you know, like the Ninja Turtles and things like that. So there's a certain nostalgia that you have in your heart for these things that you grew up with. And Mario's one of them, but I have zero desire to see the Mario movie after seeing the first one and thinking this just isn't what it needs to be.
Same thing, only different. And you mentioned Masters of the Universe. I didn't watch He-Man as a cartoon. I remember the god-awful movie starring Frank Langella and
Langella, though, was Skeletor, yeah. Dolph Lundgren, yeah.
You know, I don't think it could get much worse than that. The bar is very low for that.
It is, yeah, it is. Well, we've got an interesting cast, you know. I mean, Idris Elba's getting a good paycheck, I'm guessing, for that. But, you know, I mean, we're in an era.
He's playing Heimdall at Skull, so that's what he's doing.
But, you know, he's getting some money, and that's good, you know, good for him. But, yeah, I mean, you know, but it goes to show you that these nostalgia movies, I mean, even a few years ago, Barbie came out and was a huge success, you know, box office, critically, several Oscar nominations. So it's evident that you can succeed with these, you know, these intellectual properties, but it seems like we get more of the schlocky crap from movies like Mario or, like you mentioned, the 80s Masters of the Universe that just, I don't know. It's like they don't know how to wrap it up and make it a cohesive package for people to, you know, to digest, but then also not be just fan service, but also just be as good as it can possibly be.
Or they don't respect the property.
That's true too. Yeah, that is definitely true. Well, you know, I mean, obviously Mario will continue making money, but, you know, anybody that maybe adults looking for something different coming up here in the theaters, Normal, you know, who would have thunk action star Bob Odenkirk is back at it. In his 60s, he's become this unbelievable action hero, which is just mind-blowing to me. But Bob Odenkirk is back with another action movie. Tell us about Normal.
Well, let's call it a comedic action movie.
Right, but it's still, I mean, you know, you don't expect a 60-year-old plus Bob Odenkirk to dive into even action comedy, or at least, you know, sort of the, you know, harsher rated R kind of action comedy.
Well, yeah, but see, and this is how I started my review, which runs tomorrow. Um, with After Nobody and Nobody Two, he's in danger of repeating himself,
Hmm.
and that's the dilemma this movie faced. But that being the case, he pulls it off. Him and his
Yeah.
collaborators pull it off. Um, it's like the Nobody films, but it's different. I mean, the characters in Nobody, his covert agent, whatever you want to call him, and the character here, Ulysses, an interim sheriff of in normal Minnesota, are kind of similar. They walk around in this with this morose attitude, hangdog expression a lot of the time, yada yada yada. But there's something different here. And the best way I was able to describe this movie is that it's Fargo on steroids.
Okay, well that's not bad. Not bad company to be in though. If you're gonna reference Fargo.
I mean, it's an action comedy. Like I said, he plays Ulysses, an interim sheriff who obviously something in his past sent him to interim status. He takes a short-term gig in Normal, Minnesota, because the previous sheriff died out in the cold of Minnesota. Gee,
Okay.
what do you think is going on there? Now
Right.
he starts to ingratiate himself in his town. Nice, slow, methodical setup, at least for a 91-minute movie. And he starts to suspect that things aren't quite right there. Now the setup comes in 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 the movie's opening when you hear a Japanese version of Black Sabbath's Paranoid of all things,
Okay.
and you watch as the leader of Yakuza in Japan basically exiles a few of his men to Normal, Minnesota. Ulysses gets to this pretty idyllic town for him. It's quiet, serene. It gives him an escape from his life, meaning that tragedy I mentioned, and the fact that his wife, or soon to be ex-wife, whom he still loves, won't return his calls. He starts to, like I say, ingratiate himself with the people who are overly nice, ridiculously nice. They have a passion for this town, which is basically half dead. It really is. I mean, half the population stayed, a lot of them have left. He notices curious things, for instance, like there's a new town hall that costs $16.5 million. Where does a half dead rural town get something like money
Yeah.
like that? And he eventually comes to suspect there is foul play with that former sheriff's death. It's confirmed when, of all things, there's a bank robbery, and the robbers aren't interested in what's in the bank's drawers. They know something's in the bank's vault, and they want that. I don't want to spoil anything. The robbers trigger activation by people you wouldn't expect, and all hell breaks loose. And from that moment on, it moves at a breakneck speed. Dark,
Mhm.
dark
Yeah.
comedy, pointed one liners, and like Nobody, graphic violence. Um, but it's a cut above that because beneath it all, um, Odenkirk, who wrote the script with his writing buddy Derek Kolstad, who did a couple Wick films, there's a message there about rural America dying that you could easily latch onto and appreciate.
Yeah.
Director Ben Wheatley moves things along. He manages to get that message across in a subtle way, but like I said, there are some ridiculously funny dark moments here that make the movie definitely worth your time, and it clocks in at a very modest 91 minutes. So there you go.
Yeah.
Even at that runtime and in this day of the mega movie,
Right.
worth the price of admission.
Yeah, not bad. Never bad to have a briskly paced movie every now and again. Sometimes the movies go a little bit lengthy. I think we've had some of that over the last few years, where it seems like indulgent filmmaking is at its peak right now. But it's good to hear that. Did you give a final grade for Normal?
I am giving it a B.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Well, I know we have some streaming to talk about. Big Mistakes out on Netflix right now. Obviously, spearheaded by Dan Levy, Eugene Levy's son. Obviously, he was a big creator with Schitt's Creek several years ago. Here he is, back in the saddle with another program. Obviously, there's a lot of excitement, I think, when he brings something to the TV table, because everybody was so enamored with Schitt's Creek. It did very well at the Emmys, and overall, just a well-written comedy, and here he is back again with Big Mistakes. Tell us about this one.
Well, this isn't Schitt's Creek.
Okay.
It's very, very much in the dark realm.
Okay.
And it tells a story of a gay priest who's in the closet.
Okay.
And how his sister managed to get involved with organized crime. And it's absurdist comedy. It really is. Yeah. It's absurdist comedy that's very well done. He portrays Nick, like I said, a pastor. I don't think he's an actual priest. He's clergyman. And, his grandmother is on the verge of dying, and their mother, Nick and I'm trying to remember his sister's name. She's played by Taylor Ortega, but their mother, played by Laurie Metcalf, orders them to buy this nice bauble for their dying grandmother. And instead of buying it, they steal it. Turns out that after being stolen, I should say the sister stole it. After stealing it, it turns out the piece of jewelry wasn't a piece of costume jewelry. It was a $70,000 necklace. And by stealing it, they find themselves in the debt of a Russian mobster. And through the 8-episode run, it slowly unravels what this mobster is into and how it's going to affect the brother and sister's lives. And there are some thrilling comedic moments. This is a type of show you can binge in one sitting.
Okay.
As I did when I received it. It didn't take long. Great performances. Dan Levy is something else. I mean, the guy's got a great sense of comedic timing, along with a sense of restrained mayhem, I guess is the best way I describe it. Mm-hmm. He can be a little frantic on a lower key.
Mm-hmm.
And Taylor Ortega is positively charming, along with being cynical.
Okay.
And just a wee bit narcissistic. It's a character right after my own heart. Love her to death. Laurie Metcalf is Laurie Metcalf. I think she's
great. Yeah.
A shelf full of Emmys. Generally good stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see something out there. I know, it seems like right now we're in sort of a big surge of new shows and TV going on right now. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Hacks is back for its 5th and final season, which I still feel is a must-watch show on HBO and HBO Max. But a lot of good stuff out there right now. Anything else that you're watching or, that may be coming up here in the next few weeks?
Well, some of you might want to check out The Outcome with Keanu Reeves, directed by Jonah Hill. I think you'd like it because it's one of these things that satirizes Hollywood.
Okay.
Reeves plays a child actor who's grown into this superstar, and a video turns up from his past that they have to deal with, and they decide the best way for him to deal with it is to apologize to everyone he may have ticked off. It doesn't work entirely. There are some good meta moments related to Hollywood there. The best scene in the entire film, though, is between Reeves' character, whose name is Reef Hawk, of all things, as he apologizes to his mother. And I don't know if you know who Susan Lucci is.
I do.
Susan Lucci, who still looks fantastic at the age of 79, plays his mother. And to hear and watch America's former soap diva drop F-bombs at Keanu Reeves is absolutely hilarious. Best scene in the movie. Okay. Gave the movie a C. Jonah Hill directed, but it's disjointed. Starts and stops.
Yeah.
Beyond that, The Boys are back, and it's gory, vulgar, whatever you want to call it. Again, another series I enjoy. The vulgar, the graphic violence is there to satirize everything related to number one, violence, comic books, all of it. And of course, it's relevant for today's audience if you're a fan, because it blatantly takes on the issue of authoritarianism and fascism. Yeah. And it appeals to me on that intellectual level. So
sure.
That's back. And let's see. I think that's basically it. Oh, we didn't get to talk about Yumi and Tuscany.
How could we have forgotten, George?
It was a surprise.
Okay.
It was how many rom-coms have been good lately?
I'm sure there's been a few, but I can't really think of anything off the top of my head that would say, go see this one.
Yeah, well, there was a point in the movie, and it stars Haley Bailey and Regé-Jean Page of Bridgerton fame. And it started off where I thought it was going to be this cliche-ridden mess.
Yeah.
And it tells a story of a would-be chef who basically steals the home of an Italian traveling businessman while he was out on the road, pretending to be his fiance. And it turns into a quite charming film. And I was shocked. I was happy because I didn't have to watch a piece of trash or piffle. And
that's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Bailey and Paige have great chemistry. The Italian family that she ingratiates herself to, funny, charming. It's a heartfelt kind of throwback to, and the era I can best describe or compare it to is the 80s. Heyday, excuse me, of romantic comedies when you saw Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan, and those people who ruled. Is it on that level? No. There aren't many actors who are Tom Hanks or actresses who are Meg Ryan. But there's something there we're seeing, whether you see it in the theater, if it's still there, or you wait for it to start streaming.
Okay. Well, I know that we've got some big heavy hitters coming here in the next couple of weeks. Maybe next week we will talk about Michael, or is that on the schedule for you?
Michael is on the schedule for me.
Okay. And then maybe we can also discuss the summer movie preview. I mean, it's already here, George. We are end of April, which is, of course, these days, April is the summer movie season again now. We've talked about that in years past. It just keeps going and going further into the spring at this point. Even March now is really big blockbusters as well, which, this is one of those years where I feel like based on the release schedule that we've seen, does this feel like Hollywood is kind of like back a little bit, like post-COVID back as far as you've got Doomsday and Dune going at it in December. You've got Spider-Man in July. The Odyssey is in July. I mean, you've got some like big hitters coming week after week. And it just seems like it's been a few years since we've seen one after another or even competing on the same day, post-COVID especially.
Number one, I'm going to push back a little bit on that. This feels like a year where they're back to a 1980s, early 90 release schedule.
Okay.
Because the summer movie season doesn't, in my opinion, really kick in until Mortal Kombat 2, and I think that's May 8th or May 15th.
Yeah.
So that's a pullback right there to me. Yeah, you got Mario Brothers, but there's nothing else surrounding it. As far as the actual release schedule, it's funky. You've got the big players. Well, you mentioned Doomsday. Well, Devil Wears Prada, they're not really pimping that much.
Okay.
Their next biggest summer release is Toy Story 5. And then from what I understand, they don't have a lot after that.
Okay.
Meaning Disney.
Yeah.
Warner Brothers has Mortal Kombat. And I think there's something you saying that it's going to be week after week. I agree with that. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I go back to an era when I remember, 2 or 3 movies, big movies, box office on a weekend. It wasn't.
It seems like studios play it too safe almost, where they almost want to give those other movies the runway for a few weeks and then come in after that when that box office has died down a little bit. But now, this year, and obviously it's possible that Doomsday or Dune, one of those 2 movies, could move off of that December 18th release date. But if you do move off of it, where do you go? Do you push back to the next year? Do you really want to push back to the next year? Do you push to November, October? The schedule is kind of full at this point for a movement, and I know that's been talked about, but what do you do if do you have a Barbenheimer situation where you have everybody carving out 6 hours of theater time for Doomsday and Dune 3 on December 18th? Or, it's going to be interesting to see what the box office looks like at the end of the year, because you get this feeling that there's going to be a lot of billion-dollar type movies, and it could kick off next week with Michael, depending on really the response that it can get. Obviously, Michael Jackson, among the most popular musicians of all time, and obviously getting the biopic treatment. I still have some reservations about it. I'm not a huge Antoine Fuqua fan, but we'll see what happens with it.
Here's my problem with that. There was a report out last week that the Michael Jackson's estate paid millions to basically scrub some of the.
Okay, so it's going to be a sanitized.
Yeah, and that's why I have an extreme problem with that. If you're going to present something like that, you need to paint the entire picture.
Yeah,
and you could make the script. Fuqua could take a side in it, and treat it from his perspective, but either perspective should be there. I don't know how much they deal with it, if at all, but I don't need a glossy tribute video. As much as I grew up, and mind you, the Jackson 5 were my first introduction to music. In 1969, I was 4 years old.
Yeah,
Michael Jackson is an artist I grew up with. I cried the day he died. I have no shame in admitting that. But humans are complex, and I don't need that simplistic version of him up there.
Yeah.
If there's a side to tell it.
Yeah. It feels like they're going to gloss over that because they're going to have. I'm assuming this movie is not going to be like a start to finish of his life, where it's going to be, I know it's going to be sort of the growing up in the Jackson 5 and then hitting that pop icon status, but I wonder if they're going to cut it off maybe before some of the other stuff came out or some of the weird stuff started happening with him. and just his, behavior became more erratic, and maybe cut that off so they can at least say, well, this isn't telling his whole life story. This is just in the vacuum what you're going to get. But I don't like hearing that, like you don't. I had reservations to begin with because, again, I'm not a big Antoine Fuqua fan. I just think I don't think his filmmaking sensibilities really align to something like this necessarily. Obviously, he struck gold with like Training Day, but ever since then, I just think he's a dude that just directs movies and kind of rides coattails of being a successful at the box office with other movies. But I don't know, like if this had like Oscar gold written on it, I don't think Antoine Fuqua is directing it. Like I feel like it's the kind of movie where they're just playing for that big money at the box office. And if this was really like a contender type movie, like they really wanted to get into that biopic movie, gets nominated for 20 awards, basically, it probably would have gone in a different direction. And like you said, would the family want that? And it sounds like they would not, ever consider anything other than what this movie is probably going to be, which is just fan service and
musical, which is what the play, the musical Michael was. I enjoyed the music, but there was some of, at least there was some of that perspective I was talking about. Yeah. Before you mentioned movies going head to head and Dune and Doomsday going against one another, and asked where else one of them could go. Well, yeah. typically movies, there are no new releases after Thanksgiving.
Right.
So those films can do their thing in those 2 weeks. So December 11th would have been a slot to move to if either of those films were afraid of the competition. However, the third Jumanji movie, or fourth, depending on how you count Jumanji movies, opens on December 11th.
Okay, yeah.
So there we go.
I mean, yeah, December 4th is there's not much going on there, but again, I guess you could always go after the Thanksgiving box office. You've got the Hunger Games, you've got the Meet the Fockers sequel. I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of people are going to be upset though if Dune, or I don't know about they'll be as upset about Dune, but Doomsday though, I think people would be upset if they moved into 2027 or something like that. But I don't see that happening. I think Disney needs a hit, like Marvel needs a box office hit. And I think that they're probably going to be confident enough that they'll win the box office. And it's not like, splitting the box office with Dune and you're not going to get the same people that want to see your movie like they want to see Dune. Like you're going to have some carryover for both movies, I think. Like I think Dune is obviously a little bit more in the auteur sense with Villeneuve, but I still think you're going to have science fiction bros and fantasy movie, lovers that are going to want to see both movies, and that will only exacerbate box office totals like it did with, the Barbenheimer stuff. Like everybody was going nuts about it, even though those were two different movies. They really rode each other's coattails into some big box office numbers.
See, therein lies the difference. There were two different movies, and they run a real. You're right. They run a real risk of splitting the audience here, unless you get half the audience going one night and the other right. night. It's always a possibility. I've given up trying to predict what's going to happen with movie audiences anymore. We shall see.
I think the mass audiences will favor Doomsday. Only because, Dune has done well at the box office. The second one did better than the first. And, there'd be a lot of hope, obviously, for the third one doing even better. But at the end of the day, Doomsday is probably going to be a near $2 billion or more $2 billion movie. Whereas Dune, if Dune succeeds, it's probably in like the $800-900 million range. And you're probably pretty happy if you're Warner Brothers if that happens.
Probably.
or
Probably.
Skydance or whatever, or Paramount, whatever,
Don't depress me.
Yeah. Well, as always, you can read everything that George writes at beaconjournal.com. We will talk again next week, my friend. Enjoy Michael and enjoy some more streaming, and we will see you again very soon, my friend.
All righty.